Greetings. Are you thinking about how to stay competitive or be competitive in the era of AI? And are you in a knowledge driven industry? Today, I'm going to start off with a story of an architecture and engineering firm, but the story really applies to just about all knowledge driven industries. Those are the industries that are most heavily going to be impacted by AI, both in a positive and also in a challenging way, you could say. So let's get started with the story. We're going to spend just a few minutes, and then I invite you to join me for a live Q&A that's going to start at noon Central Time today on basically that same topic. All right. Here's the story. This is an architecture and engineering firm, and currently, like many knowledge-driven industries, they're looking for inspiring people to join their team. All right, so this is a three-part story. The first part is this. John, let's call him John, is leading this thriving architecture and engineering firm. And it's really that interplay between these two disciplines that makes them unique and so successful and led to rapid growth. But then around 2010, the industry, especially on the architecture side, experienced a serious slump, and they had to let go, unfortunately, of a lot of their senior architects. And that happened industry-wide. And so then a few years later, when the industry re-emerged, it was very difficult to find senior architects. That's right around the time that John and I met, and we started to have this really great discussion with these 5 questions. How can we accelerate the progression of junior architects to become senior architects? Because we can't hire senior architects, well, then we got to make the junior architects more senior as quickly as possible. So how could we possibly make the processes, or at least some of them, more efficient and, require essentially less expertise to operate them? So make them more, quote unquote, foolproof. They're not fools, obviously. And what makes a senior professional a senior anyway? What is the definition of that? What skills and tacit wisdom do they possess? And also, what role will artificial intelligence play in all of that? These are great questions. So pondering these questions led to me sharing with John about Brilliance Mining. And it's essentially a revolutionary approach to transfer knowledge out of someone's brain and put it into a system, and then make it possible to transfer that knowledge to others over and over again. So what we did is we captured and documented the knowledge of a soon to retire senior engineer. He was actually the department head of the electrical engineering department. And there is 2 parts to that knowledge: the knowledge that you could think of, and the knowledge that he was just operating with but wasn't even aware of, and that's unconscious competence. So what we did is we extracted both parts of it, and obviously the second part is so much harder to do. And then both of them became immortal. Now, what happened next was I can't even say that. The key junior engineer, who was actually slated to take over the leadership of that electrical department, got an offer somewhere else and left. And normally, of course, that would have been just heartbreaking for the company. And of course, it's never fun. However, because they had a system now that contained all that knowledge that we had extracted from the senior leader, it wasn't as bad, because now they could quickly train a replacement. And that's really the difference when you have a system, rather than relying on mentoring somebody one-on-one, taking them on the wing, etc. I mean, do that, but don't only do that. That's the point of the story. So with that story, I hope you feel inspired to hear the 5 secrets. All right. Number 1, AI automation will be massive. And that's true especially for knowledge-driven industries like architecture and engineering, like science, like sales, like management, business, finance, all those areas are deeply knowledge driven. It's predicted by Goldman Sachs that more than a third of the tasks will be automated. And this is going down very quickly. It's not just coming, it's already here. The second point is traditional knowledge transfer is breaking down. And the story really illustrates that, doesn't it? Because traditionally, we foresee that someone's going to retire. We then, hone someone in, train someone, mentor someone to become their replacement. But what if that person leaves? Or what if the retirement isn't planned? And there's all kinds of ways that it can break down. But most of all, there is really a big generational gap. There's a lot of people that are retiring now or going to retire very soon. And then you have the junior workforce, which I think we can all agree are a whole lot more transient. And that's not a judgment thing, it's just a fact. So then, two types of knowledge. That's the third thing we need to be aware of. There is conscious knowledge that you have, and you can provide it the time and willingness, you can teach that. But there's the second part of knowledge, which without it, things don't quite work. And that's the unconscious competence. That is when you unconsciously do the right thing because you just know based on many years of experience. And that especially I call brilliance. And so that has a lot to do, a lot of that knowledge, that unconscious competence hangs out at the interface of things. So let's say in this example, engineering and architecture. But it's not just that. Let's say electrical engineering and the parks and recs people that you always work with, your clients, and understanding their world. There's a lot of things there. And in fact, when we did this work where I worked with the senior electrical engineer and the junior person who was supposed to take over on extracting that, and it became clear that the senior person didn't think of some of the things that needed to be given to the junior person. But by having fresh eyes in the conversation, which in this case came from me, we spotted those gaps. And that is how we began to fill in and then completed filling in those gaps. And that's how you get at that unconscious competence. So there's a whole boatload of tricks and tips that we teach and that we share that make that possible. And by and large, it's conversational and it's also observational. So you can either, you can have a conversation about it, and then you just have to be very curious. So I'll give you some resources where you can learn more about that. But so number 3, there are two types of knowledge, conscious and unconscious. And then brilliance isn't just genius. Often we think, when you say the word brilliance, I'm thinking of Einstein, I'm thinking of Elon Musk, there's a handful of people I'm thinking of. But brilliance, the way I use that word, it's not that. Usually it can be, but most of the time it's that unique knowledge, as I said, at the interface of different disciplines, or it could be as I said, the examples I already gave, or it could be software. You're developing software, but it's for legislative drafting, or you're developing robots, but it is for mowing lawns. So now you need to know a lot about the people who mow lawns professionally, and or the residential people who mow their lawns, etc., etc. So my point is, there's always more than one field at play, and there's all this unique knowledge that you acquire by doing your work, and that is brilliance. And it can be lost. It would have been lost if the senior electrical engineer just had left. A lot of that unconscious competence would have been lost. Okay, number 5, unique personal knowledge is more valuable than ever. And that's very true, because when you think about AI makes it possible to more quickly access and process information that's in the public domain. And of course, it's also able to process and make available information that's not in the public domain, that's, let's say, in the domain of your company. But one thing it cannot do, it cannot read people's minds. It cannot get at that unconscious competence. Now, think about what could happen if you actually took AI and Brilliance Mining together. Because now you can access information that's uniquely in the heads of your people and yourself. And by harvesting that, extracting that, and that's not painful because, as I said, it's observational and it's conversational. So knives are not involved. No pickaxes. Okay. Anyway, when you have that knowledge, now you can systematically onboard people. You can think about how you create training systems that get your staff to a senior status so much faster, right? And you can also, of course, do advanced training, etc. You can even track who has gotten what training and all those kinds of things. Learning management systems and so forth are excellent delivery systems for that. But then the other thing you can do is you can feed some of that information into AI tools and have, let's say, company-specific AI tools where your employees can query this big pile of information. Now, I would say that that's on top of the systematic onboarding and on top of topic-specific, well-prepared training courses that are at the advanced level. But it's on top of. And by the way, you can, of course, also use those things for AI tools for educating your customers. So one example I will give you is if you go to my website, thebrilliancemind.com, I will put the link in. I've installed an AI tool there that will allow you to ask all kinds of questions, about Brilliance Mining. And what it will draw on is all the blogs that I have written that are on that website. So I actually wrote one blog every single day for an entire year. So there's 365 brilliance nuggets, as I call them. It draws on that. And then I've been blogging on a more weekly basis since then. So that's interesting because think about what you could do with that for you. There are really two areas for monetizing your unique knowledge. By unique knowledge, again, brilliance, I mean the stuff that's hanging out in your brain that's unique, that you can't just look up anywhere. So the dominant thing that we're talking about here is the fact that companies increasingly train their own. And that means, you look for, let's say, architects or engineers who may be, more junior. And then you train them in the secret sauce of what exactly you need for them to know to be effective in your company. And that means you have a lot more choice of who you can hire. And also you can much more easily hire for cultural fit, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to hire people who have some curiosity. You're going to have to train people in some things that they cannot, they can't learn anywhere else. I mean, you're not going to find software developers who know anything about legislative drafting. That just doesn't exist usually, right? I mean, maybe there's 5 people in the whole world who know that or something like that, right? So you're going to have to train them anyway. So you need people who are curious, who are willing to learn, or else it's just not going to work. So that means you have to hire for cultural fit, which may mean that you have to relax your standards a little bit for, what skills they already come with. So increasingly companies see that, and they invest in capturing and transferring knowledge. So that's number one. Number two is increasingly people are going like, man, prices are going up, salaries are not keeping pace, and I may need a side hustle. I don't want to have a second job or third job. Are you crazy? No, I'd like to start my own business based on knowledge that I have in my head. What could I do with that? Or there's all these end of career enterprises where somebody switches gear. And I mean, basically that is what I did in 2005. I had a successful career as a scientist. I was a group leader, etc. And I said, man, I want to have my own business. What do I know that I can monetize? What is unique knowledge that I can monetize? And so it started off at the interface between science and technology on one side and business on the other, because so many of us scientists, we are not given too much training in how to commercialize our innovations. All right. So a quick tool or introduction to the tool that makes this possible. Brilliance Mining is truly a game changer. And there's lots of stories, including the one I told you at the beginning. It begins, number one, with brilliance mapping. And then that's basically saying, what is your brilliance that you have in your brain, in other people's brains on your team? Then extraction, again, it's conversational and observational. And then replication is where you make the money with it. This is where now this knowledge has been made into something that can be passed on. And that means that involves some degree of understanding how to teach effectively. It's not just, flinging a bunch of knowledge at somebody. I'm sure you know that. All right. So what we do is we teach you how to mind your brilliance. And we also offer support. And that can come at different levels. But typically it's some degree of coaching, some degree of feedback, fresh eyes. And if you need to, if you want to, we also offer do it with you services where we do some of the processing of the information, or, put things into the learning management system and, illustrate and so forth, all the legwork that goes with that, so that you can focus on what you do best, which is do your business. There are 3 stages of an organization, whether that's a business or nonprofit: starting, scaling, and sustaining. And your brilliance plays a really big role in all of them. In starting, of course, you want to make sure that you know what you uniquely bring to the table and how to best put it into play. Scaling, now you go beyond yourself and perhaps a little team, and now you really can't spoon feed people anymore. You need knowledge transfer systems. And then sustaining, well, that's really an extension of the scaling, because now, whereas in scaling, maybe it was okay to extract some of the knowledge. In sustaining, you really want to get at just about all of it, because otherwise you may very well join the 85% of businesses that cannot even sell, that just shut down when the original founder is no longer doing it. At some point we all have to lean out for one reason or another. So I want to end this with an invitation to a Q&A. It's going to be virtual but live, and it's all about this topic: brilliance knowledge transfer. So knowledge transfer that's focused on that unique brilliance. And it's about harnessing the power of artificial intelligence, as well as maximizing the use of your unique knowledge. And that will help you to stay ahead of the competition. I invite you to go to this link, register, and join us at noon Central, and I will see you there. Cheers.